Hello and welcome to another edition of the AI Report. You're watching News 9, and first up, let's tell you all that happened in the world of artificial intelligence this week.
NVIDIA's CFO said the chipmaker's deal to invest $100 billion in ChatGPT parent OpenAI isn't yet finalised. The partnership would tie two of the top heavyweights in the AI race. The deal proposal involves deploying at least 10 gigawatts of systems for OpenAI, enough to power over 8 million US homes. Anthropic, the AI startup backed by Google and Amazon, is preparing for an IPO as early as next year. That was according to a Financial Times report. It added the startup's negotiating a private funding round that could give it a valuation exceeding $300 billion. But an Anthropic spokesperson didn't confirm to Reuters when or even if it will go public. And Taiwan's tech-heavy economy is expected to grow at its fastest pace in 15 years as it rides the wave of demand for AI technology. That's according to the country's statistics office. It said GDP is expected to expand more than 7.3% this year, a jump from the near 4.5% pace predicted in August. However, it added US tariffs are likely to cloud next year's outlook.
iPhone maker Apple may just have taken the first real step on its road to catching up with the likes of Google, Meta, Amazon, as well as Microsoft in the race for AI supremacy. Well, Apple, as you might have noticed, has been lagging behind here. Picture this. Tim Cook, the Apple CEO, chose optimization over innovation. It worked to the extent that it was Tim Cook who turned Apple into a $4 trillion company only behind NVIDIA. But in the process, this is something that happened. First up, Siri, the OG of artificial intelligence, stagnated. Once a pioneering voice assistant, Siri has fallen behind competitors like Google Assistant as well as ChatGPT in terms of conversational abilities and accuracy. Now, Apple's strong commitment to user privacy means most data is processed on the device itself. It limits its ability to use massive cloud-based datasets and feedback loops that competitors leverage to rapidly train and improve their own AI models. Now, key generative AI features and a revamped Siri have faced repeated delays, with some major updates now promised only for next year, that's 2026. Now, Apple reportedly lags in developing AI chips for data centers and does not operate enough large-scale data centers compared to its rivals, sometimes relying on Google's infrastructure for AI training. Now, that makes the onboarding of AI veteran Amar Subramanya all the more relevant for Apple at this precarious time. On the 1st of December, Apple announced that Indian-origin AI veteran Amar Subramanya will be taking over the role of Vice President for Artificial Intelligence. Now, Subramanian's arrival is a big win for Apple considering his past experience in the world of AI. Now, this may not be the end of Apple's troubles, but it sure points towards a course correction. Now, to study this development, we are this morning joined by Barnik, Chitran, Maitra. Barnik, thank you so much for being here with us on the AI Report. First up, help us understand, why has Apple lagged behind? Why was the OG of AI by way of Siri lagging behind so massively when it comes to AI?
So there are many reasons. I think you have to go back probably a decade to the struggles of Apple. Apple in the last decade has actually spent $10 billion plus on AI on something called Project Titan, which was the smart Apple car. In fact, a lot of the focus of Apple in the years between 2015 to 2020 was on Project Titan, building the Apple car, which, by the way, got killed right around the pandemic. And that's where a lot of other companies were investing in large language models and the transformer architecture. Apple actually lost its, I would say, head start. Secondly, if you look at the Siri architecture, Siri is a smart assistant. I would not go as far to call it an AI because it's a very command and control and task-oriented architecture.
Right.
In the modern world, right, of generative AI and the GPT architecture, in fact, Siri, if any, is only dumb. In fact, Apple for the last 3 years has tried to make Siri more intelligent, integrating it with LLMs or trying to build their own small and large language models. I think the project is codenamed Ajax or AX, but it suffered from a lot of hallucination and a lot of errors, which is why the features have got delayed indefinitely. Again, this comes back to the way Apple operates. Apple is built for optimization. Apple is built for efficiencies. Apple is not built for cross-function collaboration and collaborative R&D, which is the foundation for AI.
All right, so where does the story go from here, Barnik? Help us unpack that as well. Because number one, of course, you're mentioning the most important being culture. And it seems that perhaps the culture, even with the leadership changes, first by bringing in a new AI vice president and then Tim Cook's own replacement potentially next year, could take care of one part of the culture, at least the speaking, the language of innovation could potentially come through. But the second is that it doesn't potentially have the right engineers and the right staffing to be able to build large AI models at scale, unlike its rivals.
So I think the issue fundamentally is a talent issue and a quality of talent issue. I think Project Titan has given Apple probably thousands of engineers who are well versed in AI, but they are not deep AI researchers. So again, the hiring of the new AI gentleman, Mr. Subramanya, is hopeful to plug some of the gaps. Let's step back and look at what their announced strategy for AI is right now. I think there are two key pillars which they've been talking about, which are important pillars. One is what's called the Apple chip in the data center, or the ACDC project, right? Where Apple, buoyed by the success of the M series chips, is now actually building its own silicon to go into data centers. Now, the bet they have is that if they control their own silicon hardware, that they will be able to actually control inference on these chips, and that will make it more efficient than buying chips from NVIDIA. The second bet they are making is, by the way, one of the most innovative projects Apple has done in a while is the home robotics project. I think there are two projects there. There is a J495 and there's a J590, where they are building robotic assistants and robotic touchscreens, right, to get into the space of physical AI. I think with the coming in of Mr. Subramanya, it is expected that Apple is going to do far more pivots. One expected pivot is to move away from their on-device private cloud infrastructure to more hybrid cloud infrastructure model. Secondly, I think there will be more investments in fundamental reasoning models, right? Whether they be large language models or the next version of the GPT infrastructure. And the third thing which Apple has missed out is actually creating more developer tools for AI, so that more invisible AI apps can run on Apple. Remember, Apple today has more than 2 billion users who are captive on the Apple ecosystem, who are actually now dependent on third-party prompt-oriented AIs, which by definition are not that private, right? And it fundamentally unveils. So 3-4 changes expected. Will this happen overnight? I would suspect not. I think there's a big change needed in personnel. There's a big change needed in culture. So a lot of softer obstacles to climb, right?
So are there risks involved in that sort of pivot strategy as well? Because right now the core focus, in fact the core product of Apple happens to be the devices, the iPhones, the Apple Watch, the iPad, the Mac. Is there a risk, inherent risk in making a massive pivot? Because you may want to focus on the next big thing. It could come at the cost of ignoring your already large business.
A little bit of yes and no. I'll tell you why. Because see, AI also transcends the physical world as well as the software world. I think so. The home robotics project, which is the physical AI project, is actually the most important project from a future devices point of view. Now, I would argue that Apple is not doing enough. In fact, if you look at even the hardware, I think there are several competitors who are generations ahead in terms of the fold phone, in terms of newer form factors. So I think there is far more catching up to do even on the physical or the device side, which is why the home robotics project will catch up. I think in general, the biggest risk is that Apple doesn't do enough fast enough, right? That is the biggest risk to the strategy, because Apple, the legacy of the last 12, 15 years under Tim Cook's legacy has been one of conservatism, it has been one of frugalism, is one of measured bets, right? And not where people make bets ahead of the curve, right? So I think the biggest risk for Apple is not to make these investments in either physical AI or the software AI fast enough to catch up with the competition. Because if you remember, OpenAI is also now working on an AI phone, right? They've hired actually John Ives who's the original designer of the iPhone. And if Apple doesn't get its act together in AI in general, which is both software, platform, cloud, and hardware, it's very likely that even in the hardware, they will be left behind in the next 5 to 7 years.
All right, so of course that risk of getting left behind continues to loom over Apple. But for now, let's leave it at that. Barnik, thank you so much for your time this morning, for really unpacking where Apple is at the moment and where it is headed from here. Thank you so much for your time. All right, Barnik was talking about Apple getting into hardware, and hardware is the next story that we're going to discuss. And this happens to come by way of a Chinese company that some are suspecting could threaten NVIDIA. We'll bring you that after this short break.